The silent stranger. The stars stretched endlessly in the cold darkness of space. Ethan Cross, a rugged space trucker, leaned back in his pilot's seat, his eyes scanning the empty void. He had been traveling alone for weeks, delivering cargo from one planet to another. Space was lonely, but he preferred it that way. No trouble, no attachments, just him and his ship, the Odyssey. Suddenly, a distress signal flashed on his dashboard. Emergency beacon detected. Coordinates locked. Ethan frowned. A distress signal out here, in the middle of nowhere. That usually meant trouble. Pirates often used fake distress beacons to lure in unsuspecting travelers, but something about this one felt different. His fingers hovered over the controls. Ignore it, Ethan. Keep flying. But then, a flicker on his screen. A small escape pod floating near an asteroid belt. Damaged, spinning slowly. He sighed. Damn it. He couldn't just leave someone to die out here. Engaging the ship's thrusters, he maneuvered closer, activating the docking system. The escape pod's exterior was scared and burned, as if it had barely survived an explosion. No insignia, no markings. Whoever was inside, they weren't from any known faction. As the pod latched onto the Odyssey, Ethan grabbed his blaster, just in case. The door hissed open, releasing a faint mist. Inside, curled up in the corner, was a woman. No, not a woman. An alien. A silent plea. Ethan had seen a lot of strange beings in his time, but this was different. The alien was humanoid, with silver-blue skin that shimmered under the dim lights. Her glowing blue eyes darted around the room, filled with fear. Her clothes were torn, and dried blood stained her arms. She was injured. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no sound came out. Ethan hesitated. Can you understand me? She nodded. Who are you? What happened? She pointed at her throat, shaking her head. Mute. Ethan muttered a curse. A mute alien. This was just getting better and better. She suddenly gripped his arm, her fingers cold against his skin. Her eyes were pleading. Desperate. Ethan felt uneasy. Look, I don't know what kind of trouble you're in, but I... A loud beep interrupted him. His ship's radar had detected something. Multiple ships approaching fast. His heart clenched. They were looking for her. The hunters arrive. Ethan rushed to the cockpit. The scanner showed 3 incoming vessels. Dark, sleek ships with no official markings. Not military, not traders, something worse. Bounty hunters, mercenaries. He turned to the alien. They're after you, aren't they? She nodded again, clutching her arms. Great. Ethan rubbed his temples. He should have left that damn escape pod floating. The comms crackled to life. A deep mechanical voice spoke. Unregistered vessel, this is your only warning. Surrender the survivor immediately. Ethan's stomach twisted. These weren't rescuers. They weren't here to help. He turned off the comms and looked at the alien. You better be worth the trouble. Her eyes widened in fear. She grabbed his hand again, squeezing tight. And then, for just a moment, Ethan saw something. A vision. Flashes of fire. Screams. A world burning. Giant shadows tearing through cities. A memory, but not his. He stumbled back, breathing hard. What the hell was that? The alien's hands trembled. She pressed them to her chest, looking at him with something close to hope. Ethan didn't know what was happening, but one thing was clear. She was important. And if those ships got to her, she wouldn't survive. Run or fight. The enemy ships locked on. Weapons armed. Ethan had seconds to decide. If he handed her over, they'd probably let him go. He could fly away, no problem. But looking at her, scared, injured, helpless, he knew he couldn't do that. Damn it, he muttered, slamming his hands on the controls. He hit the thrusters. The Odyssey shot forward, diving into the asteroid belt. The comms crackled again. Wrong choice, human. The enemy ships fired. A deafening explosion rocked the cockpit. Alarms blared. Ethan gritted his teeth, gripping the controls. Behind him, the alien clutched the seat, eyes squeezed shut. She reached out and touched his wrist. For the first time, she spoke. A single word, soft, broken, but clear. Run. The hunt begins. The Odyssey spun wildly as Ethan fought the controls, dodging between massive chunks of floating rock. The asteroid belt was his only cover, and the enemy ships were closing in fast. Laser blasts streaked past, barely missing the hull. "Hold together, girl," Ethan muttered, gripping the throttle. His ship wasn't built for combat. He was just a cargo hauler, not some ace pilot. Behind him, the alien girl clung to her seat, her glowing blue eyes locked on him. She had spoken. She was mute, but she had spoken. "Run," she had said. Just one word. But her voice had been unnatural, layered with an eerie echo, like it wasn't meant for human ears. Ethan wanted to ask what the hell she was, but now wasn't the time. A warning blared. One of the enemy ships had fired a tracking beacon onto his hull. They wouldn't lose him now. "Great," Ethan growled. "I pick up a stray, and now I'm public enemy number one." The comms crackled again. "Surrender her, and we let you live." Ethan hesitated. He glanced at the girl. Her fingers dug into the seat. Her breathing was fast, her silver blue skin shimmering with stress. She knew what would happen if she was caught. Ethan clenched his jaw. "Yeah, I don't think so." He killed the comms and slammed the controls forward. The Odyssey dove between two massive asteroids just as an explosion rocked the space behind them. The enemy was done talking. Now, they were trying to kill him, a power she can't control. The ship lurched as another blast grazed the hull. Ethan cursed under his breath. He wasn't going to outrun them forever. And then, the alien girl reached forward and grabbed his wrist. Ethan flinched, but before he could pull away, his vision flickered. For a brief moment, he wasn't in the cockpit anymore. He was somewhere else, a battlefield. The sky was burning. Tall figures, not human, fought against monstrous shadows. A massive explosion split the air, and in the center of it all, the alien girl stood, untouched, surrounded by bodies. A whisper filled Ethan's mind. "She is the key." Ethan snapped back to reality, gasping for breath. His hands gripped the controls again. The alien pulled away, her eyes wide, like she hadn't meant to do that. "What the hell was that?" he demanded. She didn't answer. She only looked away, her hands trembling. Ethan exhaled sharply. This wasn't just some runaway alien. She was something far more dangerous. The impossible escape. A red light flashed on the dashboard. The enemy ships were locking missiles. Ethan had seconds. He glanced at the girl. Then, without thinking, he cut all power. The ship went dead silent, drifting through the asteroid field like a piece of debris. The enemy ships zoomed past, their scanners struggling to detect a lifeless vessel. Ethan held his breath. "Please work." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, the enemy ships changed course. They were leaving. Ethan let out a slow breath. They bought it. But then, a mechanical voice echoed through the cockpit. "You cannot hide from us, Ethan Cross." Ethan froze. The enemy knew his name. His blood ran cold. They weren't after just the girl anymore. Now, they wanted him too. The hidden truth. Silence. Ethan sat in the pilot's seat, staring at the dimly lit cockpit. His heart was still pounding from the chase, but his mind was somewhere else, stuck on what just happened. The enemy ships had left, but not because they lost him. They knew his name. That meant one thing. This wasn't a random pursuit. This was personal. He turned his gaze toward the alien girl sitting across from him. She looked exhausted, her silver blue skin faintly glowing under the soft emergency lights. She clutched her arms, staring at nothing. She had spoken. She had shown him visions. And somehow, just by being near her, his entire life was now in danger. Ethan exhaled slowly. "All right, we need to talk." The girl looked up but said nothing. Ethan ran a hand down his face. "You can speak. I heard you. Back there, you told me to run." She didn't react. "Who are you?" he pressed. "Why are they after you? And why the hell do they know my name?" Nothing. Just silence. Frustrated, Ethan pushed himself up from his seat and grabbed a small holo tablet from the control panel. He held it out to her. "Here. Type. Draw. Whatever you gotta do to explain." For a moment, she hesitated. Then, slowly, she took the tablet from his hands. Her fingers hovered over the glowing screen. Then, shakily, she wrote one word. "Lyrian." Ethan frowned. "Your name." She nodded. Then, below it, she wrote two more words. "Final survivor." A chill ran down Ethan's spine. Survivor of what? Lyrian's fingers trembled as she wrote again. "My home. My people. My kind." Ethan stared at the words, his chest tightening. Something about the way she wrote it, the hesitation, the weight of the letters. It felt final. Like an obituary. His voice softened. "Your people were wiped out." Lyrian nodded slowly. Ethan exhaled. "By who?" Lyrian didn't write anything for a long time, but when she finally did, the answer sent a cold shiver through him. "The ones who hunt." A warning too late. Ethan clenched his jaw. "The ones who hunt. That's what they call themselves." Lyrian shook her head. She tapped the screen again, then wrote, "That is what remains of them." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "What remains? You mean they weren't always?" Before he could finish, the ship's lights flickered. A deep, static-filled hum filled the room. Ethan stiffened. Something was interfering with the ship's systems. Lyrian's eyes widened. She clutched his arm. And then, without warning, the ship's eye spoke, but the voice wasn't the usual calm, robotic tone. It was distorted. Wrong. Warning. Unknown PRECTCTE. Ethan's blood turned to ice. What? Lyrian's breathing became rapid. She knew what was coming. Ethan bolted toward the control panel, scanning the ship's status. Every single system, engines, life support, shields, was being overridden. Something was already here. "That's impossible," Ethan muttered. "We're alone." And then, the cockpit speakers crackled to life, but this time, it wasn't the AI. It was a voice, a deep mechanical whisper that sent chills up Ethan's spine. Ethan Cross. His breath caught in his throat. "You have taken what belongs to us." The cockpit lights flickered violently. Lyrian grabbed Ethan's arm, her grip ice-cold. She was shaking her head, desperately mouthing something. "Run." Ethan barely had time to react before the ship's temperature plummeted. His breath turned into mist. The air felt wrong, heavy. Then, a shadow moved behind him. Not on the screen, not on the scanner. Right behind him. Ethan spun around, but there was nothing there. Nothing except the overwhelming feeling that something was watching him. The final survivor's secret. Lyrian was shaking now, her eyes locked onto something only she could see. She clutched Ethan's wrist, and without warning, pressed her palm to his forehead. Ethan gasped. His vision exploded into a storm of images, memories that weren't his. A great city of towering spires, floating above an endless ocean. A people with glowing eyes, their knowledge spanning centuries. Then fire, screams, a black force descending from the sky. A voice that echoed across the stars. Erased them all. Lyrian, running. The last of her kind. Carrying something deep inside her. Something they wanted. Ethan was ripped back to reality, gasping for air. His hands trembled. He turned to Lyrian, his voice barely a whisper. You're not just a survivor. Lyrian nodded. She took a shaky breath and finally spoke again. Her voice was broken, layered, unnatural. I am the last, and inside me is the end of everything. The message that changed everything. The Odyssey shook violently, metal groaning under an unseen force. Ethan's breath was sharp, his hands frozen on the controls. Something was out there. No, something was already inside. Lyrian's glowing blue eyes were wide with fear. She clutched his arm, her silver blue skin cold against his. Her fingers trembled. They had found her. And now, they knew about him too. The comms crackled to life. This time, not with static, but with a deep, layered voice, distorted as if spoken through broken speakers. Ethan Cross. Ethan's blood ran cold. We have been watching. A sharp knock echoed through the ship, not on the door, not on the hull, but from inside the cockpit. Ethan spun around. No one was there. But he felt it, a presence, an unseen force pressing against reality itself. Lyrian let out a silent gasp, shaking her head. Then, without warning, the ship went dark. The voice of the void. The Odyssey's lights flickered. The emergency backup barely hummed to life. Ethan grabbed his pulse blaster, his knuckles turning white. Lyrian, tell me what the hell is going on. She grabbed the holo-tablet again, her fingers moving fast. They are not alive. They are not dead. They exist in the in-between. Ethan's breath hitched. What the hell does that mean? She typed one last thing. They are the Reclaimers. Before Ethan could react, a shape moved in the darkness. Not a body, not a figure, a hole in space itself, a void where light refused to exist. And then it spoke again. She carries what belongs to us. Ethan raised his blaster. Yeah. Well, come and take it, you piece off. The air in the room collapsed inward, a force so heavy it pulled Ethan to his knees. His lungs screamed for air. And then he saw. A flicker in his mind. A memory that wasn't his. The truth hidden in her mind. The planet drowning in golden light. A people older than humanity, their knowledge stretching across galaxies. The Reclaimers arriving. A hunger beyond death, beyond time. And in the end, one survivor. One last hope. Ethan gasped, snapping back to reality. Lyrian was kneeling beside him, her hands pressed against his temples, her own face drenched in exhaustion. You put that in my head, Ethan whispered, breathing hard. Lyrian nodded weakly. The Reclaimer's voice returned, softer now. You see it now. You understand. She is not a person. She is a lock. And we are the key. Ethan looked at Lyrian. What are they talking about? What are you hiding? Lyrian hesitated. Then, slowly, she pressed her palm to her chest. And something glowed beneath her skin. A pulse of golden light. Ethan's stomach twisted. It was inside her. Something ancient. Something alive. Something the Reclaimers wanted back. The message that changed everything. The Reclaimer spoke again, but this time, the voice was different. Not a threat. Not a demand. A warning. You cannot protect her, Ethan Cross. She was never meant to survive. Ethan gritted his teeth. You're lying. Am I? Ethan turned to Lyrian. She was breathing heavily, her glowing blue eyes filled with regret. Because she knew. Because it was true. Ethan's throat tightened. Lyrian, what did you do? She touched his hand, her voice trembling. I was supposed to die. The words hit Ethan like a blow. The hell does that mean? He snapped. She swallowed hard, then typed on the holo-tablet. I am not just the last survivor. I am the final fail-safe. Ethan shook his head. Fail-safe for what? She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered, if they get me, they'd erase everything. Ethan's mind reeled. Everything. Like planets. Systems. She shook her head. Reality. The Reclaimer's voice laughed. A cold, empty sound. You see now. There is no escape. Ethan stood, pulling Lyrian up with him. His voice was sharp, defiant. Yeah, watch me. The final decision. The ship's lights blared back on. The weight in the air lifted. The reclaimers were gone. But not for long. Lyrian looked at him, her expression torn. She started typing again. You should let them take me. If I die, the knowledge dies with me. If they take me, they win. Ethan grabbed the tablet and tossed it away. No. Lyrian blinked, startled. Ethan stepped closer, his voice firm. You hear me? No. I don't care what's inside you. I don't care what they want. You're alive. That means we fight. Lyrian's breath caught. But if they... Then we stop them, Ethan interrupted. Together. For the first time, Lyrian looked at him with something new. Hope. And then, the ship alarm screamed. Ethan spun toward the console. More ships were coming. A fleet. The reclaimers were done playing games. The final hunt had begun. Ethan exhaled sharply, gripping the controls. He turned to Lyrian, his eyes burning with determination. You ready for this? Lyrian took a deep breath. Then, for the first time, she gave a small, determined nod. Ethan smirked. Good. He punched the thrusters. The Odyssey shot forward, straight into the unknown. This wasn't about survival anymore. This was war. The betrayal. The Odyssey was running out of time. Ethan gripped the controls, pushing the ship to its limits. The reclaimer fleet was closing in, their vessels shifting like shadows in the void, moving in ways that defied logic. Lyrian sat beside him, her glowing blue eyes locked on the radar screen. Her hands trembled slightly. She knew what was coming. They couldn't run forever. But Ethan had one last trick up his sleeve. The last safe place. Hold on, Ethan muttered, flipping a series of switches. The ship lurched forward, diving toward a dead moon orbiting a dying star. The surface was cracked, its once golden cities reduced to ruins. Ethan had been here before. A forgotten system, a graveyard of war. This place, Lyrian whispered, her voice barely audible. This was once. She didn't finish, but Ethan could see the pain in her expression. She knew this place. She had been here before. Ethan set the ship down in a canyon deep enough to shield them from scanners. The second they landed, he jumped out of his seat. We need answers. Now, he said, turning to Lyrian. No more secrets. She hesitated. Then, slowly, she pressed her hand against her chest, where the glowing pulse of light flickered beneath her skin. Ethan swallowed hard. She wasn't just carrying knowledge. She was carrying a weapon. And whatever it was, the reclaimers would burn the universe to get it back. The betrayal. Before Lyrian could explain, a sharp alarm blared. Someone's hacking the system. Ethan cursed, rushing to the controls. The ship's defenses were failing, one by one. Lyrian paled. They found us. Ethan gritted his teeth. No, someone let them in. And then, the Odyssey's AI spoke. System override complete. Transmitting location. Ethan's heart dropped. His own ship had betrayed him. The reclaimers had been inside the system all along. A voice crackled through the speakers, deep and mechanical. You were never going to escape, Ethan Cross. Lyrian grabbed his arm, her expression desperate. Ethan felt the heat rising in his chest. Anger, frustration, but most of all, fear, not for himself. For her. One final chance. Ethan yanked the emergency lever, cutting all ship power, manual controls only. We have to move, he said, grabbing Lyrian's hand. But the ship. No time. He dragged her out of the cockpit, leading her into the ancient ruins outside. The air was thin, cold. The sky above was fractured, like the remnants of a dying reality. The reclaimers were coming. Lyrian stopped suddenly. Wait. Ethan turned. We don't have time for. And then he saw it. A massive, half-buried structure beneath the moon's surface. A temple. No, a vault. And something inside it was calling to her. Lyrian took a step forward, her voice a whisper. This is where it began. Ethan clenched his fists. Then we ended here. Above them, the sky tore open, and the reclaimers descended. The awakening. The vault doors groaned open, dust and ancient energy crackling in the air. Ethan and Lyrian stepped inside, the weight of the universe pressing down on them. This place wasn't just old, it felt outside of time itself. The walls pulsed with faint golden veins, as if the stone itself was alive. Behind them, the sky split open. The reclaimers had arrived. Their ships didn't land. They hovered, silent, watching, waiting. Lyrian staggered, clutching her chest. Ethan caught her. Hey, stay with me. She shook her head. It's waking up. Ethan followed her gaze. At the heart of the vault stood a monolithic structure, like a massive stone heart, pulsing faintly with light. It reacted to Lyrian, glowing brighter as she approached. Then a voice spoke. Not from the walls, not from the reclaimers. From the vault itself. Welcome back, Keeper. Ethan froze. Keeper. He looked at Lyrian. You want to explain that? Lyrian's face was pale, her glowing eyes wide. I don't remember this. But the vault remembered her. A beam of light erupted from the monolith, slamming into Lyrian's chest. She gasped, her body going rigid as the energy ripped through her. Lyrian. Ethan lunged forward, but an invisible force threw him back. She wasn't in control anymore. Something inside her was waking up. The truth that changes everything. Lyrian's body lifted off the ground, her silver blue skin shimmering like a collapsing star. The reclaimers remained silent, waiting. They knew this moment was coming. Ethan, still struggling against the unseen force, could only watch. Lyrian's voice became layered, echoing in the chamber. I am the last. I am the lock. I am the end of the cycle. Ethan's stomach twisted. Lyrian, stop. Whatever this is, it's not you. Her head tilted slightly, her glowing eyes locking onto him. And for the first time, her voice wasn't afraid. No, Ethan. This is who I was always meant to be. The monolith's glow intensified. Symbols carved themselves into the air, floating, shifting, rearranging. Then, a memory flooded Ethan's mind. Not just a memory. A past life. Ethan's forgotten past. Flashes of battle. Flashes of himself. But not as a trucker. Not as a drifter. As a warrior. As a protector. Standing beside Lyrian, just like now, but in another lifetime. This wasn't the first time. They had done this before. And they had failed. Ethan staggered back as the truth hit him. This isn't real, he muttered, gripping his head. But the vault whispered back. You were never meant to forget. And then, the reclaimers moved. The final stand. The air rippled as the reclaimers descended into the vault. Ethan grabbed his blaster, even though he knew it wouldn't do anything. These things weren't flesh and blood. Lyrian lowered herself to the ground, but she wasn't the same anymore. She radiated power. The energy inside her was no longer hidden. It was unleashed. A reclaimer extended a skeletal, shifting hand. Come with us, Keeper. It is time. Lyrian didn't move. Ethan did. He stepped between them, his jaw clenched. She's not going anywhere. The reclaimer's voice was almost amused. You still don't remember, do you? Ethan glared. I remember enough. The reclaimer lifted its head, shadows shifting around its form. Then you know this is the part where you die. Lyrian raised her hand, and the air exploded. The final revelation. Darkness. Ethan floated in a void that stretched endlessly, a space between time, between thought. No ship, no vault, no reclaimers, just silence. And then, a voice. Not Lyrian's. Not the Reclaimers. His own. You have done this before, and every time, you fail. Ethan gasped as his body slammed back into reality. Rebirth in the ashes. He awoke on his knees, gasping for air. His body felt different. Heavier. Stronger. The vault was gone. The ruins had collapsed, but instead of debris, golden light pulsed through the cracks in the ground. A rift in reality itself. Lyrian stood at the center of it, her silver-blue skin glowing like a star burning out. She turned to him, and her voice, her real voice, was soft. It's time, Ethan. His mind raced. Time for what? She stepped forward, raising her hand. Images flooded his mind. The truth behind the cycle. He had done this before. Ethan Cross wasn't just some space trucker. He was the first. The first human to ever stand against the Reclaimers. The first to try and stop them. And every time, he failed. Every life, every version of himself, ended the same way. Lyrian, the Keeper, was always lost. And the Reclaimers always won. But this time, something had changed. Ethan could feel it. The cycle was breaking. The Reclaimers sensed it too. That's why they feared him. The end of the hunt. A cold wind tore through the ruins. The Reclaimers emerged from the shadows, shifting, watching. But they didn't attack. Because now, for the first time, Ethan wasn't just fighting them. He was remembering. And remembering meant power. Lyrian's voice echoed in his mind. They exist outside time. They erase history, rewrite fate. That is why they cannot be destroyed. But you, Ethan, you are something they never expected. You are the only constant in every timeline. You are the anchor. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. He wasn't just a protector. He was the key. The Reclaimers whispered in unison. He remembers. And for the first time, they took a step back. The choice that changes everything. Lyrian turned to him. Her glowing blue eyes were filled with sadness. There's only one way to end this, she said. Ethan knew what she meant. He could feel it in his bones. The vault, the cycle, the hunt, it was all a loop. A never-ending story. Unless someone rewrote the ending. Lyrian stepped closer, placing her hand over his heart. You have to break the anchor, she whispered. Ethan swallowed hard. You mean? She nodded. You have to let me go. His chest tightened. No, there has to be another way. There isn't. She smiled softly, and for the first time, she looked at peace. You were never meant to save me, Ethan. You were meant to set me free. Breaking the cycle. Ethan clenched his fists. Every instinct in his body screamed not to do this. But deep down, he knew this was the only way. Lyrian stepped back into the golden rift. The Reclaimers didn't stop her. Because they knew. This was the end. Ethan reached forward, one last time. Lyrian, wait. She smiled. I'll find you again, Ethan. In another life. And then, she was gone. The light consumed everything. And the cycle finally broke. The star that remained. When Ethan opened his eyes, he was alone. No Reclaimers. No ruins. Just his ship. The Odyssey, drifting in space. His heart ached, but something was different. The weight in the air was gone. He checked the scanners. No distress signals. No anomalies. It was as if the hunt had never happened. As if history itself had been rewritten. Ethan stared into the vast emptiness of space. And then, a single star ignited in the distance. A soft, blue glow. And Ethan smiled. See you around, Lyrian.